Doesn't have Georgia on the schedule. Like, man, this was just an absolute beatdown. I feel like I think this is what I said on the podcast leading into this game, that this Georgia offense just has so many playmakers, and you can see Todd Monken's genius at work now. Like, they're just loaded, with running backs, receivers, tight ends, just all of them. Like, I think Kenny McIntosh had about 18 yards rushing in this game and had about 120 yards receiving. Like, you could just like Justin Flo and Noah Sewell were like the biggest storyline of this Oregon defense. And I'm honestly not sure they made a play the entire game. I know Justin Flo had the roughing the passer on Stetson Bennett, which personally I thought was questionable. Like, it's not the worst call I've ever seen on a quarterback for late hit, but like, if you're hitting the quarterback simultaneously when he's throwing, like, I don't know how it can be roughing the passer, but like, you just saw Georgia just absolutely abused the matchups. Like, Ladd McConkey is a legit playmaker in this offense. Darnell Washington, like, Brock Bowers is the best player on this offense a year ago. They score 49 points, and I think he had 2 catches for about 30 yards. Like, they're just so loaded. And Stetson Bennett looked as good as I think we've ever seen him look.
Couple things here, though. And I think this is a fair question. Did any quarterback in football have more time to throw over the weekend than Stetson Bennett?
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a great, a valid point to that. Georgia's offensive line, this might be one of the best offensive lines in college football this year.
I think it's the best. Like, they crushed Oregon's defensive line. That was the big part of the game to me, is that people talk about Stetson, and a lot of it was because of that Heisman type play where he ran around, avoided the sack, and then found Ladd McConkey by himself in the end zone. It felt like a Heisman moment type thing. But I think Georgia fans are now getting so defensive about Stetson, where if you mention, and this was something I mentioned in the family, where I'm like, I was taking notes. I want a stat of like how much time, which quarterback had the most amount of time per drop back to throw. And I mean, this is not a slight at Stetson. This is not something Stetson can control. But generally speaking, quarterbacks are significantly better when they have a clean pocket over and over again. There are quarterbacks, you look at the numbers, their quarterback grading with a clean pocket versus not, and a lot of it can make or break a quarterback. This is an advantage for Georgia. This is not a slight against Stetson Bennett. This is a reason that they are going to pulverize everybody else in their wake this year. But if you're going to throw the Stetson, part of the difference between Bryce Young and Stetson Bennett is that Alabama offensive line sucked last year. The reason that Bryce Young won the Heisman was because Bryce was having to improvise a bunch last year. He was having to run for his life a bunch. There's a reason Doug Marrone is not the offensive line coach at Alabama anymore. It is the Kentucky offensive line coach that Saban brought in. This is not a shot against Stetson Bennett, but
it's a slight on Stetson Bennett, though. No one's ever saying this about Tua, though, right? Like, no one's saying, yeah, but Tua's got offensive line and these great receivers. Like, it's just like, oh my God, you see Tua? This guy's incredible. So it is a slight to an extent. It's just about keeping the same energy with Stetson that you do with everybody else.
Well, I'm saying not you, he was efficient. Like, Stetson was great. Like, Stetson, two things can be true. Stetson was great, and he's one of the best quarterbacks in college football. Stetson also benefited, and I think people can overreact about what you saw from Stetson on Saturday in particular, where it's just when you have that kind of time, that matters. And a lot of it was yak stuff. Like, Ladd McConkey was doing stuff after the catch. Darnell Washington was doing stuff after the catch. Brock Bowers was doing stuff. You mentioned McIntosh in the flat. Those were guys doing what they needed to do.
Yeah, so many screens. And I think that's when you know you're just better than somebody, because you're just like, we don't really need to run a play. We don't need to design something to get someone open. We're just going to throw it to him. We're going to block your guys, and we're going to break tackles. Like, it seemed just so simple. Like, so no, there's definitely a lot of short stuff that was thrown, but I think he was also like 5 of 7. I don't know how many yards, a couple of touchdowns throwing downfield as well. So I thought that the throw he had to A.D. Mitchell, the back shoulder touchdown, it was just such a sharp, like, crisp pass and catch. It's just, that was what you didn't really see with Stetson Bennett. It was like so many of the plays he made were kind of improv plays, kind of running around, finding somebody, leaning on the run game a lot last year. Like the actual passing game just looked just way better timed. Everything just looked sharper. It looked crisper. I think he threw like 5-6 incompletions in the game, and I think 2 or 3 of those were him throwing the ball away. So I mean, the offense was just looked so good. It was a lot of short stuff, but I mean, that's college football, right? That's how you run an offense. You just be efficient. It was 368 yards passing. It was the most since Aaron Murray in 2013 against Auburn. The prayer at Jordan Hare game. He threw over 400 yards. But yeah, so Stetson, for all the Georgia fans that hated on Stetson, like it could be an overreaction to just week 1, but I think we all know Oregon is, if nothing else, a solid football team. Maybe one of the 2 or 3 best on Georgia's schedule. Time will remain to tell on that. But for all the Georgia fans that hated on Stetson, like if he has a couple more performances like this, his name's going to be at the top of the UGA record books on several stats. I think he's set for a pretty good year this year.
Jalen Carter was sensational in this one. You look at him just causing absolute havoc. But, and this was an interesting stat, Rob Mosley, Oregon Ducks writer, he said, he tweeted this after the game. That said, the last 3 times Oregon lost its opener, 2009, 2011, 2019, the Ducks finished the year at the Rose Bowl. So maybe something to put in the back of your mind for freaking out about week 1. Craziness. I will say too, and this is something that I think was overlooked a little bit, because a lot of this was Oregon's defense did not have the players to stop and match up with this offensive line, with the skill players out wide. Like Lad McConkey was just running circles around these dudes. And you were able to put in Kendall Milton, who has beefed up. He's a jack dude now. Like he is significantly stronger than I remember him when he first burst on the scene a couple of years ago. But Oregon drove several times. Like Georgia, it wasn't like Bo Nix was struggling to move the ball early on in this one. Like that's something that I think is going to be overlooked, that Oregon had over 300 yards of offense in this one. They ran 5 yards to carry against Georgia as a whole. That was something that I think is going to be overlooked a little bit, because Bo Nix had some really awful picks and just did some really backbreaking stuff in this one. But they were able to move the ball. I think you're going to be able to run on this team a little bit this year. This defense is still elite. Georgia's defense is still elite. I mean, Malachi Starks, as a true freshman, led the team in tackles in the opener. That's pretty wild. The 5-star athlete out of, what was it, Jefferson? I think he's from Jefferson, right?
He is indeed. Yeah, Michael Williams from Columbus. Yeah. He got the start in this game, true freshman, and Malachi Starks. Yeah, I think he might solidify that safety spot as well.
Crazy pick in this one.
Without a doubt. And I think Georgia, just based on what they had coming back, so many question marks, but you're like, the way Georgia recruits and Kirby, they most likely will still have a lot of players. And I don't even think that was accounting for any freshmen coming in and contributing right away. And so if you got 2 true freshmen coming in and, making plays on this defense, like they might not be as good as 2021, but they also don't have to play the 2021 team. So this could still be the best defense in college football. And I don't know if I would agree with you that they necessarily drove the ball that much. A lot of their drives ended in punts.
How many yards though? Like I could pull up their drive by drive, because like if you look, 1, 2, they got first down on that first drive.
One of the interceptions came pretty late, pretty deep in Georgia territory. The Chris Smith interception.
Yeah. I guess I'd have to go back a little bit and go.
And then they also just pulled the 2021 classic that Georgia did every single game last year. Someone puts together a 8-minute drive, 15-play drive to try to score a garbage time touchdown there in the fourth quarter. Like, and this was one of the times they were able to keep him out of the end zone. But yeah, I mean, this defense, Will Anderson has talked about like he's just above and beyond the best defensive player in college football. Like, I don't think those people know who Jalen Carter is. Like, Will Anderson is not on another level than Jalen Carter. Like, they play different positions, but Jalen Carter, I think, is equally as dominant. Like, he might be the best player in college football, in my opinion. Like, he could be the number one pick in the draft. He's just an absolute, one man wrecking crew on the defensive line.
For sure. Matt Green, where are we going next?
I think the next biggest like kind of statement win, I think, kind of over the weekend, unless I'm overlooking someone, obviously Ohio State beating Notre Dame was a good win, but Florida beating Utah, I think, was massive, just from a psychological standpoint. Like, we don't know how good Utah is. We don't know how good the Pac-12 is. The best team in the Pac-12, might be a 3 or 4 loss team. Like, who really knows? But it simply doesn't matter for Florida. Like, the number 7 ranked team came into your building, brand new regime, like first game. To be able to come away with a win is just like, obviously this team has a lot to work on, but to be able to come away with a win is just, it was a massive win.